I never planned to fall for him, but there I was, organizing every detail of my high school rival's perfect wedding while slowly realizing the groom was everything I'd ever wanted. The worst part? He was starting to look at me the same way. Hey there, if you've ever found yourself in a completely impossible situation that somehow turned your entire life upside down, hit that subscribe button and notification bell because trust me, this story is wild. And stick around until the end to hear what happened after the wedding day drama. So here's the thing about being an event planner in this economy. It's brutal. 6 months ago, I quit my soul-crushing corporate job to launch Perfect Day Planning, and let me tell you, my savings account has been giving me the silent treatment ever since. My apartment doubles as my office, which means client meetings happen at my IKEA coffee table while I pray they don't notice the laundry I've hidden behind my couch. Not exactly the glamorous business owner life I imagined. I was that girl in high school with color-coded planners and Post-its for everything. Organization was my superpower. Everyone else? Total chaos. Except for Vanessa Mitchell. God, even saying her name still makes my eye twitch a little. Vanessa was everything I wasn't. Effortlessly beautiful, obscenely wealthy, and somehow still valedictorian, despite never seeming to study. She didn't just win at everything. She made sure you knew you'd lost. Sophomore year, I finally beat her for class president. The next week, her dad donated a new computer lab to the school, and guess who suddenly became the student technology ambassador? Junior year, I scored higher on the SATs, so she convinced the school newspaper to do a feature on her early acceptance to Yale. But prom was the final straw. I'd been nominated for prom queen, the one popularity contest I never thought I'd have a shot at. I spent weeks saving up for a dress, something that made me feel beautiful for once. Then Vanessa showed up in the exact same dress, except hers was designer, and she'd had it altered to fit her perfectly. During the crowning ceremony, she tripped and spilled punch all over me. Accidentally, of course. The photos of me drenched in red punch while she accepted the crown still haunted my social media for years. After high school, we went our separate ways. I heard through mutual friends that she'd become some hotshot marketing executive in the city. I told myself I'd moved on, that adult me was above petty high school drama. Then last Tuesday, her name appeared in my inbox, and I nearly choked on my discount coffee. Hello, my fiance and I are planning our wedding for this summer. Your company was recommended to us, and we'd love to discuss options. Our budget is flexible for the right planner. I read it 17 times. This had to be a joke, right? Vanessa Mitchell wanted me to plan her wedding. The girl who once told me I couldn't organize a game of tic-tac-toe was asking for my professional services. My finger hovered over the delete button. The satisfaction of ignoring her would be worth more than any payment. But then I glanced at my bank account app. The sad single-digit number staring back at me might as well have been laughing. My rent was due next week. My one client this month had been a small birthday party that barely covered groceries. And here was Vanessa, casually dropping flexible budget like it was nothing. Beyond the money, there was something else. Her surname. Mitchell. Still Mitchell. Which meant this wasn't just any wedding. This was the Mitchells. As in, country club, society pages, everyone who's anyone will be their Mitchells. The kind of wedding that would put my business on the map. The kind of portfolio piece that would open doors. I took a deep breath and hit reply. I'd be happy to meet and discuss your vision, I wrote, professional as could be. No mention of punch-stained dresses or stolen student council slogans. This was business. I could be an adult about this. I could plan my high school nemesis's perfect day and smile through every minute of it. After all, how much would I really have to see her? Brides are busy. I'd probably work more with her mom or her maid of honor. Little did I know I'd be working with someone else entirely. I spent 3 hours cleaning my apartment/office the morning Vanessa was scheduled to come in. Changed outfits 4 times. Even bought fresh flowers, which was ridiculous considering my budget situation. But something about facing your high school nemesis makes you revert right back to that insecure teenager. I needed to look successful, put together, like someone who hadn't just stress-eaten an entire pack of Oreos the night before. When my doorbell rang, I took one final glance in the mirror, plastered on my best professional planner smile, and opened the door. There she was, Vanessa Mitchell, somehow even more beautiful than in high school. Designer handbag, perfect blowout, not a wrinkle in sight. The universe really isn't fair sometimes. "This is cute," she said, surveying my apartment with the same look you'd give a child's crayon drawing. "Very cozy. I thought you'd have an actual office by now." 5 seconds in, and she was already under my skin. I swallowed my pride and gestured toward my meticulously arranged consultation area. "I prefer to keep overhead low so I can pass savings on to my clients." "Coffee?" She was halfway through explaining how she only drinks some specific brand of oat milk latte when the door opened again. And that's when I saw him. Tall, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, dark hair slightly tousled like he'd been running his hands through it. He was wearing a simple blue button-down that somehow made his eyes look impossibly brighter. "Sorry I'm late," he said, and his voice was warm and deep. "Parking in this neighborhood is a nightmare." "James," Vanessa said with a hint of annoyance, "this is the wedding planner I told you about. We went to high school together." He extended his hand with a genuine smile. "James Bennett, nice to meet you, and thanks for fitting us in. I know it's a tight timeline." His handshake was firm but gentle, and I noticed a small ink stain on his index finger. When our hands touched, I felt this weird little jolt. Not like a romantic movie spark, more like recognition, like meeting someone you somehow already know. "Vanessa hasn't told me how you two met," I said, trying to be professional as I pulled out my planning binder. "We've been together 2 years," Vanessa answered quickly. "Met at a charity gala. His architecture firm designed a children's hospital my company was sponsoring." James laughed softly. "What she's not telling you is that she spilled champagne all over my suit, then spent the whole night avoiding me because she was embarrassed." The affection in his voice was obvious, but I caught something else too. A wistfulness, maybe. "I was not embarrassed," Vanessa protested, checking her phone for the third time since arriving. "I was busy networking." As we got down to business, a pattern quickly emerged. I'd ask a question about their vision for the wedding. James would start to answer with thoughtful, specific ideas, and Vanessa would cut him off with vague directives like elegant but not stuffy and traditional with a modern twist, all while texting under the table. "I trust you to handle the details," she finally said, standing up after barely 30 minutes. "I have a conference call I can't miss. James can fill you in on the rest. Our budget is $200,000 and we need everything done in 3 months." My jaw nearly hit the floor. $200,000? That was more than I'd make in 3 years at my old job. After she left, an awkward silence fell between James and me. Then he sighed, his shoulders visibly relaxing. "Sorry about that. Work is crazy for her right now." "No problem. I understand busy." I hesitated, then added, "So, what's your dream wedding actually look like? When you close your eyes and picture the day, what do you see?" Something flashed across his face. Surprise, maybe appreciation. "Honestly, something smaller than what we're planning. Outdoor ceremony, good food, great music, nothing pretentious." He leaned forward, suddenly animated. "I grew up in this little town upstate with these incredible willow trees by the lake. Always thought that would be the perfect spot." We spent the next 2 hours talking through every detail, not just colors and flowers, but the feeling he wanted guests to have, the stories behind their song choices, even childhood memories that could be woven into the day. By the time we finished, I had 10 pages of notes and a strange, sinking feeling in my stomach. Because I'd never heard someone describe a more perfect wedding, and I'd never heard Vanessa's name mentioned fewer times by her future husband. Over the next few weeks, we visited 6 venues together. Vanessa made it to the first one, spent the entire time on phone calls, then declared she trusted our judgment for the rest, which meant James and I spent hours together in beautiful spaces meant for celebrating love. At venue number 3, an elegant converted barn with fairy lights strung across exposed beams, we both stopped mid-sentence, struck by the same view of rolling hills through ancient oak trees. "This is it," he whispered, then catching himself added, "I mean, if Vanessa likes it." But the way he looked at me in that moment, It was like we were sharing a secret without speaking. When he dropped me off that evening, he lingered in the car outside my building. Thanks for today. It's nice to have someone who sees things the same way I do. I should have kept it professional, should have smiled politely and said goodnight. Instead, I heard myself say, "Why are you marrying her, James?" The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, he replied, "Sometimes you follow the path that makes the most sense on paper." Then so quietly I almost missed it, even when your heart starts questioning it. I watched him drive away, the knot in my stomach growing tighter. This was bad, really bad, because in just 3 short weeks, I'd gone from meeting this man to understanding him in ways his fiancée, my former rival, clearly didn't. And worse, I was starting to count the hours until I'd see him again. What had I gotten myself into? As the weeks passed, Vanessa's appearances at planning meetings became increasingly rare. "She's launching a huge campaign," James would explain, a practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. "The timing isn't ideal with the wedding, but—" His voice would trail off, and I'd pretend not to notice how relieved he seemed that it was just us again. I told myself I was just doing my job, being thorough, attentive to my client's needs. If that client happened to be the groom instead of the bride, well, that wasn't my fault. But deep down, I knew I was crossing lines that had nothing to do with professionalism, like the afternoon we spent at the caterer's tasting. Vanessa canceled last minute, some emergency with a client that couldn't wait. James and I sat across from each other at a table meant for two, sampling dish after exquisite dish. The chef had created a dessert tower that collapsed spectacularly, just as James was leaning in to examine it. Chocolate sauce splattered across his cheek, and before I could think, I reached over with my napkin to wipe it away. Our eyes locked as my fingers brushed his skin. "You've got some, too," he said softly, reaching out to touch the corner of my mouth. Time seemed to stop. Then we both burst into uncontrollable laughter, the kind where you can't breathe, where your stomach hurts, where you're wiping away tears. The kind of laughter I hadn't experienced in years. "I haven't laughed like that since," he said afterward, catching his breath. "Since what?" I asked. "I don't know if I've ever laughed like that," he admitted, and the simplicity of his honesty broke something open inside me. Then there were the late-night calls. The first one came at 11:30 p.m., 6 weeks before the wedding. My phone lit up with James's name, and my heart did this ridiculous little flip. "Sorry to call so late," he said, his voice low. "Vanessa's worried about the flowers. She thinks peonies might be too common." I fumbled for my notebook, trying to sound professional while sitting in bed wearing my rattiest pajamas. "We can look at garden roses as an alternative. They have that same lush quality, but—" "I didn't really call about the flowers he interrupted. A pause. "I just needed to talk to someone who makes sense right now." That first call lasted 2 hours. We talked about everything. His childhood swimming in that lake with the willow trees, my dreams of eventually opening a proper studio, books we loved, places we wanted to see. Not once did we mention Vanessa or the wedding. When I finally looked at the clock, it was nearly 2 a.m. "I should let you sleep," he said reluctantly. "Yeah," I agreed, equally reluctant. "Early meeting tomorrow." Neither of us hung up for another 30 seconds. After that, the calls became our secret routine. Sometimes he'd actually have a wedding question, but mostly we'd just talk about life, fears, hopes, things you're supposed to share with the person you're planning to marry, not with their wedding planner. One night, he called while I was in the middle of a movie. "What are you watching?" he asked. "Promise not to judge?" It's that cheesy romantic comedy where they get stuck in the elevator. He laughed. "Pause it. I've never seen it." "You want to watch a movie together? Over the phone?" "Why not?" "Just describe what's happening. I'll make popcorn." So that's what we did. Me describing scenes, both of us laughing at the ridiculous plot, making up dialogue that was better than the actual script. It felt so natural, so right, that I almost forgot why we couldn't be doing this in person, side by side on a couch like normal people starting to fall for each other. Because that's what was happening. I was falling for him, hard, and I was pretty sure he was falling too. 3 weeks before the wedding, we were at the venue finalizing seating arrangements. A summer storm had blown in unexpectedly, trapping us inside the empty ballroom as rain lashed against the windows. We'd spread charts across the floor, moving little cards with guest names around like a complex puzzle. "Your friend Mark can't sit next to Vanessa's uncle," I said. "Didn't you say they had that political argument at your engagement party?" "Good memory," he murmured, looking at me with that expression that made my chest tighten. "You notice everything, don't you?" "Occupational hazard," I tried to joke, but my voice came out all wrong. We reached for the same card, our hands colliding. Instead of pulling back, his fingers slowly intertwined with mine. Time seemed to stretch and compress all at once. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, feel the warmth of his palm against mine. "This is crazy," I whispered, not pulling away. "I know," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "We can't." "I know that too." But neither of us moved. Thunder crashed outside, and somehow we were standing, still holding hands. The distance between us seemed both infinite and non-existent. "If things were different," he started to say. The door banged open. We jumped apart like guilty teenagers as the venue manager bustled in with towels for the rain. The drive back to the city was quiet, charged with everything unsaid. When he dropped me off, I couldn't meet his eyes. "I think Vanessa should come to the remaining meetings," I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He nodded slowly. "You're right." Then so softly I almost didn't hear. "But she won't." That night I lay awake staring at my ceiling, the weight of impossible choices crushing my chest. This wasn't just unprofessional anymore. It was cruel. To Vanessa, to James, to myself. I needed to step back, create distance, remember my role in all this. I was the wedding planner, not the other woman, not the one he was choosing. The next morning I woke to a text from Vanessa. "Need to finalize centerpieces. Meeting at the florist, 3 p.m. Be there." When I arrived, she was already there, flipping impatiently through a portfolio. No James. "Sorry I've been absent," she said without looking up. "Work has been insane." "It's fine," I replied automatically. "That's why you hired me." She finally met my eyes, and something in her expression shifted. "Yes, that's why I hired you. To plan my wedding to my fiancé." My blood ran cold. She knew, or at least suspected. "I've always admired how you throw yourself into projects," she continued, her voice deceptively light. "Even back in high school. Remember Tommy Bradshaw? How you tutored him for months in calculus? You were so dedicated, even after everyone knew he was just using you to get a better grade while dating me behind your back." The old wound stung fresh again. She wasn't just bringing up high school pettiness. She was sending a crystal clear message. "Vanessa," I started, not even sure what I was going to say. She cut me off. "James has always had a soft spot for sad little projects. Fixing things, helping the less fortunate. It's sweet, really." Her smile was razor sharp. "But let's be clear. When this wedding is over, you're going back to your little apartment office, and James is coming home with me. Because that's who he chose. That's the life he wants." I stood there, humiliation and anger washing over me in equal measure. Because the worst part wasn't her cruelty or her condescension. It was that she might be right. 1 week before the wedding, 7 days until I'd watched James stand at an altar and promise forever to someone else. My apartment had become wedding central. Sample centerpieces cluttering my kitchen table, timelines taped to every wall, a spare tuxedo hanging on my bedroom door, waiting for last-minute alterations. I'd barely slept in days, running on caffeine and anxiety, throwing myself into work to avoid thinking about everything else. The final venue walkthrough was scheduled for 2 p.m. Everything had to be perfect. I arrived an hour early, clipboard in hand, checking and double-checking every detail. The flowers for the ceremony arch hadn't arrived yet. The lighting company had set up in the wrong corner. The custom monogram napkins had a tiny spelling error. Normal wedding planner problems with simple solutions. I could handle those. What I couldn't handle was the hollow feeling in my chest every time I pictured James standing under that arch, waiting for Vanessa. I was on the phone arguing with the rental company about missing champagne flutes when I heard them before I saw them. Vanessa's voice, sharp and cutting, echoing down the hallway outside the reception room. "I can't believe you're doing this now, James. 1 week before our wedding?" I froze, phone still pressed to my ear, as the rental company representative droned on about delivery schedules. I'm not doing anything, James replied, his voice tight with frustration. I'm just asking if you're sure this is what you want. What I want? Vanessa's laugh was brittle. What I want is for my fiancé to stop having an emotional affair with our wedding planner a week before 200 guests arrive to celebrate our marriage. I hung up on the rental company mid-sentence. I should leave, give them privacy, pretend I hadn't heard, but my feet wouldn't move. That's not fair, James said, his voice lower now. She has nothing to do with what I'm asking you. Doesn't she? You think I haven't noticed how you look at her? How you make excuses to meet with her alone? Did you think I was stupid, James? This isn't about her, he insisted. This is about us. About the fact that yesterday your mother asked what our first dance song would be, and I realized we've never once talked about it. About how, when I mentioned postponing the Paris office expansion so we could have a real honeymoon, you said you couldn't possibly take more than 3 days off. It's about the fact that I'm not even sure why we're getting married anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice had changed, colder, calculated. Let me make something very clear. The Mitchells and the Bennetts have been working toward this merger for years. Our wedding isn't just about us. It's about two family legacies. Your father has been explicit about what happens if you back out now. So that's it? James's voice cracked. We're just a business transaction? Don't be dramatic. We make sense on paper. We always have. There was a long pause before James spoke again. That's not enough for me. Not anymore. Because of her. Vanessa's voice was acid now. You think she sees the real you? She sees a way out of her pathetic little life, James. A rich husband, financial security. That's all this is for her. You don't know her, James said so quietly I had to strain to hear. And you do? After what? 2 months of wedding planning? Please. Another pause. Fine. If you want to throw away everything for some fantasy, go ahead. But don't expect me to be waiting when you realize what a mistake you've made. Footsteps clicked sharply down the hallway, fading into silence. I stood frozen, heart pounding, unsure what to do. I should leave, pretend I hadn't heard any of it. But before I could move, James appeared in the doorway. Our eyes met, and I knew instantly that he could tell I'd heard everything. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. I gestured weakly at my clipboard. Checking the lighting, he finished, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Always the professional. James, Please don't say anything, he interrupted. I can't handle any more reality right now. I nodded, focusing on my clipboard again, trying to remember what a normal wedding planner would do in this situation. The, florist called. The peonies for the centerpieces came in a shade too pink. They're bringing samples of alternatives in an hour. Does any of it even matter? He asked, suddenly looking exhausted. I didn't know how to answer that. Of course it didn't matter. Not the flowers or the napkins or the perfect lighting, but admitting that meant acknowledging everything else. All the things we'd been carefully not saying. I should go check on the something, I mumbled, turning to leave. Don't! His hand caught mine, warm and steady. Please stay. The look in his eyes undid me completely. All the walls I'd built, all the professional boundaries I'd tried to maintain, they crumbled in an instant. I don't remember who moved first, just that suddenly we were holding each other, his face buried in my hair, my hands clutching his shirt like I was drowning. We didn't kiss. Somehow this felt more intimate than if we had. I can't do this, I whispered against his chest. I know, he replied, still holding me. No, I pulled back to look at him. I mean, I can't plan this wedding anymore. Not after, I gestured vaguely between us. Whatever this is. He nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? Because I don't, I said, feeling tears threaten. This isn't who I am, James. I don't fall for other people's fiancés. I don't sabotage weddings I'm supposed to be planning. I don't. You haven't sabotaged anything, he interrupted. If anything, you've been too professional, too good at making everyone else's dreams come true while ignoring your own. I laughed bitterly. Is that what this is? My dream? To be caught in some twisted love triangle with my high school nemesis? No, he said softly, but maybe it's mine. To finally find someone who sees me, really sees me. The sincerity in his voice broke something open inside me. I stepped back, putting physical distance between us, trying to clear my head. I need to go, I said firmly. I'll send over all the vendor contracts and timelines. Your backup planner is copied on everything. She can take over. And us? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. There is no us, James. You're getting married on Saturday. What if I wasn't? The question hung in the air between us, impossible and intoxicating. For one dangerous moment, I let myself imagine it. A world where he wasn't engaged to Vanessa, where we had met under different circumstances, where I could answer honestly. Instead, I picked up my clipboard, my shield against feelings I couldn't afford to have. I have to go. I was almost to the door when he called after me. What if I showed up at your apartment tonight? What if I told you I'm calling it off? I turned back one last time, heartbreaking. Then I'd tell you to go home and really think about what you're doing. Because regardless of how I feel, and yes, I do have feelings for you, I won't be the reason you call off your wedding. That's a decision you need to make for yourself. I walked out of that beautiful venue with its perfect lighting and soon-to-be-delivered peonies, tears streaming down my face. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing with texts from both James and Vanessa. I ignored them all and drove home, convinced I'd done the right thing by walking away, convinced that was the end of it. I was wrong about that too, because at 11:47 that night, while I was sitting on my couch surrounded by half-packed wedding planning supplies and an empty pint of ice cream, my doorbell rang. And there stood James, rain-soaked and determined, looking at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. I called it off, he said simply. Not because of you, because of me. Because I finally admitted to myself that I've been following a script someone else wrote for my life, and I'm done with that. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I'm not asking for anything, he continued. I just needed you to know. As he turned to leave, something inside me finally broke free. All the feelings I'd been suppressing, all the words I'd been swallowing. Stay, I said. Just one word, but it changed everything. The morning of what should have been James and Vanessa's wedding dawned bright and clear. No dark clouds, no symbolic rain to match the drama unfolding. Just perfect blue skies that seemed almost cruel in their beauty. I hadn't planned on going. What kind of person shows up to a wedding they helped destroy? But at 7 a.m., my phone rang. It was Vanessa's mother, frantic and confused. The wedding planner isn't answering. The backup doesn't know half the details. Vanessa is, she lowered her voice to a whisper, not handling things well. Please. I know there has been some complication with James, but we have 200 guests arriving in hours. I should have said no. I should have hung up and gone back to bed, pulled the covers over my head, and let the Mitchell-Bennett wedding disaster play out without me. Instead, I heard myself say, I'll be there in 30 minutes. Some masochistic part of me needed to see this through. Or maybe some deeply buried professional pride wouldn't let me abandon a wedding I'd spent months planning, regardless of the circumstances. Either way, I found myself driving to the venue one last time, stomach in knots. When I arrived, it was controlled chaos. Staff running in every direction, vendors setting up without proper supervision, family members barking contradictory orders. I slipped into wedding planner mode automatically, clipboard materializing in my hand like a weapon against the disorder. Within an hour, I had everything back on schedule, everyone following the right timeline, crisis temporarily averted. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. I needed to check on the bride. Vanessa was alone in the bridal suite when I knocked, sitting at the vanity in her silk robe, staring at her reflection. Our eyes met in the mirror, and for once there was no hostility there, just exhaustion. You came, she said, voice hollow. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Why? She asked, turning to face me directly. After everything? I considered lying, giving some professional explanation about contracts and obligations. Instead, I told the truth. Because 15 years ago, you spilled punch on my prom dress, and I never got over it. Because I've spent half my life trying to prove I'm better than you think I am. And because regardless of everything else, no one deserves to be alone on their wedding day. A strange look crossed her face, something like respect, possibly even understanding. He called it off, she said flatly. Did you know that? I nodded slowly. I know, but you're here anyway. She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping. Always the better person. I'm really not, I said quietly. He didn't call it off because of you, she continued, surprising me. Not entirely, anyway. We've been heading for this for months, maybe years. She turned back to the mirror, picking up her mascara like we were just two friends getting ready for a night out. The saddest part? I'm actually relieved. Isn't that pathetic? I fought so hard to keep him, and now that he's gone, all I feel is free. I stood frozen, unsure how to respond to this sudden vulnerability from a woman who'd never shown me anything but perfectly polished contempt. So what happens now? I asked finally. She applied her mascara with practiced precision. Now I go out there and tell 200 of Boston's finest that the wedding is off. My mother will have a stroke. James's father will probably sue someone. The society pages will have a field day. She sighed, looking at me again. Unless what? Unless we stick to the schedule. Have the ceremony, take the pictures, eat the overpriced dinner, dance to the band we spent a fortune on. Then tomorrow, we quietly file for annulment and go our separate ways. I stared at her, incredulous. You want to go through with a fake wedding? I want to avoid social suicide, she corrected. James already agreed. One last performance to save face, then we're done. My mind struggled to process this. James agreed to this? When? This morning. He's down the hall in the groom's suite with his groomsmen, playing his part perfectly. She smiled sadly. He always was good at doing what's expected of him. Until recently. A knock at the door interrupted us. The makeup artist had arrived. Vanessa gave me one last look. So, wedding planner, are you in? What choice did I have? I nodded, backing out of the room, my head spinning. James was here. He'd agreed to go through with a ceremony he'd called off just days ago. What did that mean for us? For the whispered stay that had changed everything? For the night we'd spent talking until dawn, carefully not crossing lines but acknowledging they existed? I didn't have time to find him before guests began arriving. The next few hours passed in a blur of last-minute adjustments, seating chart changes, and choreographing the perfect illusion of a happy wedding. I caught glimpses of James, handsome in his tuxedo, smiling that practiced smile as he greeted guests, but never close enough to talk. Then suddenly it was time. The string quartet began playing. The bridesmaids processed down the aisle in their perfectly coordinated dresses. The guests rose for the bride's entrance. I stood at the back, clipboard clutched to my chest, watching the elaborate production I'd helped create unfold with clockwork precision. Vanessa appeared at the end of the aisle, breathtaking in her designer gown, the perfect picture of a blushing bride. And James waited at the altar, handsome and stoic, playing his part in this final act. Except, he wasn't looking at his bride. His eyes were searching the crowd, moving from face to face until they found mine, hidden in the shadows at the back of the venue. Time seemed to slow as our gazes locked. Even from a distance, I could see the question in his expression, the silent plea. The minister began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. I couldn't breathe. This was wrong, all of it. Not just because of my feelings for James, but because marriage, even a fake one for appearance's sake, shouldn't be entered into as a business transaction. It shouldn't be a performance to please society or family legacy or anyone other than the two people standing at that altar. But it wasn't my place to stop it. This wasn't my decision to make. The minister continued, if anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The traditional pause. My heart pounded in my ears. And then the unexpected. I have a reason, said a clear voice. But it wasn't mine. It was James. 200 gasps filled the air simultaneously as he turned to face the guests, still standing at the altar. I'm sorry, he said, his voice steady and sure. I can't do this. Not even for show. He looked at Vanessa. You deserve better than this. We both do. What happened next will forever be etched in my memory as the most surprising moment of my life. Because Vanessa, instead of falling apart or lashing out in anger, simply smiled. A genuine smile I'd never seen from her before. He's right, she announced to the stunned crowd. We've been trying to force something that isn't there because it looked good on paper. She took off her engagement ring and handed it to James. I release you, she said softly. Then louder to the guests. The ceremony is canceled, but please stay for the reception. The food is already paid for, and frankly, we could all use a drink after this. Shocked laughter rippled through the crowd. As confused guests made their way to the reception area, I stood rooted to my spot, unable to process what had just happened. James was making his way through the thinning crowd, moving toward me with purpose. When he reached me, he didn't say a word, just took my clipboard gently from my hands and set it aside. You came, he said, echoing Vanessa's earlier words. Professional obligation, I managed weakly. Is that all it was? I looked up at him, at the hope and uncertainty in his eyes. No, I admitted. I needed to see it through, to know for sure. And now, he asked, taking my hands in his, now I think we both need some time. Real time, not stolen moments between wedding planning sessions. Time to figure out who we are apart from all this drama. He nodded slowly. That's fair. How much time are we talking? A few weeks? Months? For the first time that day, I smiled. How about we start with dinner? Next Friday, a proper date where no one's getting married afterward. His answering smile was everything. Relief and joy and promise. I'd like that. 6 months later, I was at the lake with the willow trees, watching the sunset paint the water gold. My event planning business had taken off after the Mitchell Bennett non-wedding made the society pages. Not as a scandal, but as a refreshingly honest moment in an industry built on perfect illusions. I heard footsteps on the dock behind me and smiled without turning around. You're late. Traffic, James said, sitting beside me, his shoulder warm against mine. Worth it, though. This view is exactly how I remembered it. I leaned into him, content in a way I'd never thought possible. Think this place is available for events? I asked casually. I have a client looking for a waterfront venue, something intimate, not pretentious. Good for a small wedding. He turned to look at me, one eyebrow raised. Anyone I know? I smiled, feeling my cheeks warm. Maybe. They're not in any rush, though. They're enjoying taking their time, doing things right. He took my hand, and I marveled at how natural it felt now, how the electricity of those first forbidden touches had transformed into something deeper, more sustainable. Well, he said thoughtfully, when they are ready, I happen to know a really excellent wedding planner. Is that so? I laughed. I hear she's got a strict policy about not falling for the groom. James pulled me closer. Too late for that, he murmured against my hair. Way too late. As the last light faded from the sky, I thought about all the twists and turns that had led us here. How planning my rival's wedding had somehow brought me exactly where I needed to be. Not because of fate or destiny, but because for once in my life, I'd stopped following someone else's script and started writing my own. Turns out, sometimes the happiest endings come from the messiest beginnings. You just have to be brave enough to stay until the final page. And that's how I accidentally fell for the groom while planning my rival's wedding. If this story taught me anything, it's that sometimes the messiest situations lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Drop a comment below if you've ever found yourself in an impossible love triangle. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more wildlife stories every week. Oh, and if you're wondering if James and I are still together, well, let's just say I'm planning another wedding now, but this time it's my own. See you in the next video.